I had just finished opening 3 shows back to back when the pandemic struck theatres. It felt like it was going to be a closure of a month or 2. There was then one particular Monday morning when I literally just woke up with this very definite notion that actually I had nothing to lose in just applying to do this full time. We're naturally inclined not to bother changing things, and so occasionally you need to sit down and ask yourself honestly whether it is something that you're enjoying, and if there is something you'd rather be doing, ask yourself whether there is a good reason why you haven't tried to do it. I have an idea in the back of my mind that the job I'm doing is a job that's been done for well over 150 years or so, and that I'm continuing a tradition of something that other people have also taken pride in doing well. Signalling is objectively a great career because the pay is very good, the pension is practically second to none, the sick pay is incredible, the amount of annual leave you get each year is brilliant. There's all of these perks to the job, none of which I really care about.
Everything that is interesting is 90% boring.
The standard question is, oh, so you're really into steam trains? And it's quite a difficult one to explain. You're going, well, not especially. What I have always been interested in is railway signalling. My background is maths. And I think there's an element of logic and control and systems and processes that I enjoy. When the pandemic struck and all of the theatres closed, I applied for 15 different positions and got an interview for one of them. And that's the job that I'm now doing. The basic concept of the job is being ready. There is absolutely no question that I spend at least 90% of my time sitting in a chair drinking tea. And I spend 5% walking to and from the kettle to make the next tea. And that leaves 5% where I'm doing quite a lot of work. I get through a lot of tea bags. When everything's working normally, it's very straightforward. I'm essentially in charge of the safe passage of trains for my patch, which is perhaps 8 or 10 miles. I set routes for trains between different platforms. I operate level crossings, and then in the background to all of that, there's also admin, there's emails, there's planning for engineering works. And then there's the other side of it, which is the primary reason we're there is to be standing by so that if there is any kind of an incident, anything major like a fire or a derailment or even minor things, you're standing by to be the primary point of contact. So we're then ready to liaise between the train driver, the train guard, control, station staff, emergency services if necessary, and that's something that we're heavily trained for. You're usually the only person in the room for 6 or 8 or 12 hours. Only in one of my 3 signal boxes do we get breakfast delivered on Sunday shifts because we have an absolutely wonderful member of platform staff. Every Sunday that she's on duty, she has a tradition that she makes lunch for all of her staff, and she always delivers a separate plate of it down to the signal box and the signaller, which is really lovely. I think that the network operates most effectively when the individual people who are operating their little bit of it feel like they're working as a team. It's one of the things that I think was the biggest problem with privatisation in the mid-90s, is not so much the privatisation, but is the fragmentation, that you ended up with lots of companies who were not incentivised to care about the other company's efforts. Even just waving to drivers, because I love the fact that we actually still have signal boxes that have windows directly onto the track. I think those little things help it to feel like one task that we're all involved in. My main motivation for doing a good job is pride in doing a good job. As a classic example, it's often the case at one of my stations that if one train is slightly delayed, it might mean that two trains both want the same platform at the same time. One way around that is we have a different platform that we can put one of the trains through, but I know it will then lose half a minute. It is very pleasing if I can make sure that that train gets to use the main platform first and doesn't lose half a minute without delaying the other train because everything just times perfectly. I think it's those sort of little moments of satisfaction when even if nobody else notices, you know that you've done your job as well as you possibly could have done in that moment. The major incidents that we have to deal with only happen once every month or two, or in the case of really serious incidents, once every year or two, even once every career or two. The little moments of feeling like you could have let things work out how they land and sit back and go back to checking the signal box emails, but actually you really focused on how close can I get that train to pass before that train needs to pass. Those little kind of moments can easily be several times a shift. I don't look to spend a lot of money, I don't look to save or invest a lot of money. The most important thing for me in selecting a job is something that I enjoy spending so many hours of my life doing. When I worked as a maths teacher, one of my colleagues commented that he felt it didn't make sense that the presumption was that you must, as a teacher, want to become a head of department and then a deputy headmaster and then a headmaster. I have such a clear memory of him saying, I went into teaching because I want to teach. And I definitely felt that when I was a teacher, and I feel the same as a signaller. The reason I'm signalling isn't because it's a job I can do, it's because it's a job that I enjoy doing, and I wouldn't want to find other jobs in the railway that didn't involve the actual movement of trains. If you were paid millions of pounds for doing nothing, you wouldn't really want to spend all day, every day just sat on a sofa watching TV. We gain fulfilment from having purpose and doing interesting things. I could definitely see myself still doing this in 20 years without a shadow of a doubt, but also I've spent my whole working life so far not caring to predict what I'm doing in 5 or 10 years' time. There's lots of people in theatre who are very superstitious about the way that you do things, the way that you say things, the things that you don't do, and I never gave a second thought to any of it. The railways don't really have superstitions in quite the same way, but they definitely have ghost stories in various places around the country. I was actually speaking to one of my colleagues recently who was saying that there was a ghost legend attached to one of the first signal boxes he worked, which he said was a really remote box. It was a very atmospheric box where you might imagine that it would lend itself to ghost stories. And they had a particular steady, what sounded like footsteps on the steps up to the box door at exactly 10 to 9 every night for about 10 seconds. And there would never be anyone there. And my colleague was a natural skeptic and spent ages trying to work out what it might be. They cross-referenced the time with the flight path of Concorde that was nearby. There was a military base not far away, and they tried to work out whether there might be some kind of time pulse there that was causing it. It was always dead on 10 to 9. And they never got to the bottom of it, but at some point Health and Safety replaced the wooden stairs with more rigid metal ones, and they never heard it again. Nobody knows, but it wasn't a ghost.